A Stangmas Carol. In prose, being a ghost story of Stangmas by Stangler Liebig Funny Dab, with illustrations by nobody. There's no illustrations. Stave 1. Doof's Ghost. Doof was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, Thundertaker, and the chief mourner. Stangler signed it. And Stangler's name was good upon change, for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Doof was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I didn't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Doof was as dead as a doornail. Ooh. Stangler knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Stangler and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Stangler was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole stupid Stangler. His sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, and his sole mourner. And even Stangler was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very first day of the funeral, and solemnized it with undoubted bargain. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough today. The mention of Doof's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There's no doubt that Doof was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more than remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his own ramparts that there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly tuning out after dark in a breezy spot. Say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Stangler never painted out old Doof's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the old warehouse door. Stangler and Doof. The firm was known as Stangler and Doof. Sometimes people new to the business called Stangler, and sometimes Doof. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Stangler, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low I wrote this. Why don't I know how to pronounce the word that I wrote? Temperatural ways about with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw out 1 degree at Stangmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Stangler. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather. I wrote this. No wintry weather chill him. I'll cut it in editing. It's fine. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain, and snow, and hail. What? And I remember. And sleet could boast of the advantage over him. Only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Stangler never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Stangler, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock, and no man or woman once in all his life added him on MySpace. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails and go, Grr, 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 but it would not go wow, 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 because that's what kitties do. Dogs don't meow, dumbass. Anyways, where was I? But what did Stangler care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. What the knowing ones once called nuts to Stangler. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Stangmas Eve, old Stangler sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warn them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without that although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by, and was brewing on a larger scale. The door of Stangler's counting house was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Stangler had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Stangler kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Mary Stangmas, uncle. God save you!" That's not the word. Cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Stangler's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that was the first imitation he had of his approach. "Bah," said Stangler. "Humbug." He had so heated himself with rapid walking in the fog and frost, the nephew of Stangler's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Stangmas a humbug, uncle," said Stangler's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Stangler. "Mary Stangmas, what right have you to be merry? What reason you have been merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the Stangler. I'm going crazy. Sorry, just give me a second, guys. No, this is the take. Returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What reason you have to be morose? You're rich enough." Stangler, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said, "Bah," again, and followed it up with, "Humbug." "Don't be cross, uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be?" returned the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? Mary Stangmas, out upon Mary Stangmas. What's Stangmas time but time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item through round dozen of months presented dead against you. If I could work my will," said Stangler indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Mary Stangmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle, sternly, "keep Stangmas in your own way. Let me keep it in mine." "Keep it," repeated Stangler's nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone, then," said Stangler. "Much good may it do you. What good has it ever done you?" "There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Stangmas are among the rest, but I am sure I have always thought of Stangmas time, when it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of, in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good. And I say, God bless it. The clerk in the tank involuntarily... I was doing so good. I was even doing the voice. The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Probably sounds something like this. This is what clapping tends to sound like. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. Let me hear another sound from you, said Stangler, and you'll keep your Stangmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir, he added, turning to his nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. Sorry, I had a moment. Don't be so angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow. Stangler said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression, and said that he will see him in that extremity first. But why? That was the wrong voice. That's the wrong voice. I'm gonna eat a cookie. Sorry if there's any background noise. There's a party happening. Sorry, I need to blow my nose, guys. I'm sorry. We'll cut this in post, so it doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I'm saying sorry. We'll cut this in post. Run out of water. I'll get some more later. It's fine. No, I'm good. Yeah, no, I'm good. I just needed a second. No, we'll get it next take. It's fine. Where was I? But why? Cried Stangler's nephew. Why? Why did you get married? Said Stangler. Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love, growled Stangler, as if that were the only thing in the world more ridiculous than a Mary Stangmas. Good afternoon. Nay, uncle, but you never come to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now? Good afternoon, said Stangler. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can we not be friends? Good afternoon, said Stangler. I'm sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We've never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I've made the trial to homage to Stangmas, and I'll keep my Stanglish humour to the last. So, a merry Stangmas, uncle. Good afternoon, said Stangler. And a happy new year. Good afternoon, said Stangler. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Stangler, for he returned them cordially. There's another fellow, muttered Stangler, who overheard him. My clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about Mary Stangmas. I'll retire to Bedlam. This lunatic, in letting Stangler's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen. Gentlemen? What's a gentleman? Gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood, with their hats off, in Stangler's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. Stangler and Doofs, I believe, said one of the gentlemen. I like that voice. Stangler and Doofs, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Stangler or Mr. Doof? Mr. Doof has been dead these 7 years, Stangler replied. He died 7 years ago, this very night. Oh, we have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word liberality, Stangler frowned and shook his head, and he handed the credentials back. Fucking liberals, man. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Stangler, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is usually more desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Asked Stangler. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses? Demanded Stangler. Are they still in operation? They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the pool are in full vigour, then? Said Stangler. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in your useful course, said Stangler. I'm very glad to hear it. Uh, Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of a mind body to the multitude, returned the gentleman. A few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of worth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others where want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What should I put you down for? Nothing, Stangler replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Stangler. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I do not make myself merry at Stangmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I've mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, said Stangler, then they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. But besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know it, observed the gentleman. It's not my business, Stangler returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Stangler resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people had run about with flaring lamps, proffering their servants to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping silly down at Stangler of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and the quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in the frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street, at the corner of the court, some labourers were repairing the gas pipes, and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men, otherwise known as ruffians, and boys were gathered. Warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture, the water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing sullenly congealed and turned to misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops where holly springs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor, in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house, gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Stangmas as a Lord Mayor's household should. And even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sailed out to buy the beef. Foggier yet, and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good Saint Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of weather, such that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Stangler's keyhole to regale him with a Stangmas Carol. But at the first sound of "God bless ye, merry Stanglers, may nothing you dismay," Stangler seized the ruler with such energy of action but the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to fog, and even more congenial frost. Can I say that's one of my favorite Stangmas carols? Like I I prefer Stangler Night. Wait, Stangler Night. What are the words to that? Stangler Night. Lyrics. No. Sorry, I spelled it wrong. Stangler Night lyrics. Stangler Night. Stangler Night. All is calm. All is bright. Round yon Stangler, mother and child. Holy Stanglers, so tender and mild. Sleep in Stangler's knees. Sleep in Stangler's knees. Fuck. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Stangler dismounted from his stool, and tacitly admitted to the fact that the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat. "You want all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Stangler. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Stangler, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you think yourself ill-used. I'll be bound." Sorry, I just had a little moment there. I hope you guys don't judge me for that. The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Stangler, "you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Stangler, buttoning his greatcoat to the chin. "But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Stangler walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he had boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill, and at the end of a lane of boys 20 times, in honor of its being Stangmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt, to play at the blind man's bluff. Whew, okay. No, you got this. Stinger. You got this. You're only 10 pages. In. No. No. I'm fine. Stangler took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in the chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were in a gloomy suite of rooms, in a lowering pile of building up a yard where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide-and-seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Stangler, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Stangler, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on't he threshold. Oh, I made a typo there. It's on the threshold. Okay, I'm going to fix that for next time. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Stangler had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place, and also that Stangler had as little of what is called fancy about him as any other man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, alderman, and livery. Let it also be borne. Is it livery? How did I not? Let it also be borne in the mind that Stangler had not bestowed one thought on Doof since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Stangler, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Doof's face. Doof's face. It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard was, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked up at Stangler as Doof used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible. But its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its own control, rather than a part of his own expression. As Stangler looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key, and he had relinquished, turned it steadily, walked in, and lighted the candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Doof's pigtails sticking out in the hall. But there's nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on, and so he said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. Why the fuck did he say that? I don't... The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Stangler was not a man frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs or through a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise, with but the splinter bar towards the wall and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easily. There's plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Stangler thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. I don't know, I phrased that weird. Those half a dozen gas lamps out the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Stangler's dip. Up Stangler went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Stangler liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through the rooms to see if all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel, Stangler had a cold in his head, upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in the dressing gown, which is hanging up a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual, old fire guard, old shoes, two fish baskets. Is he? I don't know what a fish basket is. I should have looked that up before just writing that. I mean, maybe it's a real thing. I don't know. A washing stand on 3 legs and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. And no, guys, I'm not describing what he looks like naked. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the last sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like feather beds, Abraham's, Belshazzar's, apostles putting out to sea in better bows, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts, and yet that face of Doof, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been blank at first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Doof's head on every one. "Humbug," said Stangler, and walked across the room. After several turns he sat down again and threw his head back in the chair. His glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room. It communicated for some purpose now forgotten with the chamber of the high story of the building. It was with great astonishment, and with a strange inexplicable dread, that as he looked he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Stangler then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. Pretty spooky, right? It's like there's ghosts in the house. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, and then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. "It's humbug still," said Stangler. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when without a pause it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up as though it cried, "I know him, Doof's ghost," and fell again. The same face, the very same. Doof in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots, the tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail. No shirt, though. Nips out. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Stangler observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses, rotten steel. His body was transparent, so that Stangler, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Stangler had often heard it said that Doof had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. Bowels? No, nor did he believe it even now. Though he looked the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and marked the very texture of his nips, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "Ow now," said Stangler, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?"
Oh!
Doof's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?"
Oh!
"Who were you, then?" said Stangler, raising his voice. "You particular for a shade?" He was going to say to a shade, but substituted this as more appropriate.
Oh!
Can you sit down?" asked Stangler, looking doubtfully at him.
Oh!
"Do it, then." Stangler asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself conditioned to take a chair, and felt that in the event of its being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it.
Oh!
Observed the ghost. "I don't," said Stangler.
Oh!
"I don't know," said Stangler.
Oh!
"Because," said Stangler, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may have been an undigested bit of beef, or brought a mustard, a cream of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are."
Oh!
Stangler was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart, by any means, waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart, as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror, for the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones.
Oh!
To sit, staring at those fixed glazed eyes in silence for a moment, would play, Stangler felt, the very deuce with him. Deuce. There was something awful, too, in the spectre's being provided with an infernal atmosphere of its own. Stangler could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case, for although the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair and skirts and tassels were still agitated by the hot vapor from an oven. "You see this toothpick?" said Stangler, returning quickly to the charge for the reason just assigned, and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from himself.
Oh!
Replied the ghost. "You are not looking at it," said Stangler.
Oh!
Said the ghost.
Oh!
"Well," returned Stangler, I've but to swallow this and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins. All of my creation, humbug, I tell you, humbug. At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal, appalling noise. The same one as the one you've been hearing, that Stangler held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom... Sorry, I need to put this. I think I have a cold or something. Taking off the bandage round its head as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast, hitting its nips. Stangler fell upon his knees and clasped the hands before his face. "Mercy," he said. "Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?"
There's like this hard rock coming out my urethra.
Replied the ghost.
You want to see it?
"I do," said Stangler. I must, but why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?"
Oh my god.
The ghost returned.
Dude, it just came out.
Again, the spectre raised a cry and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy hands. "You are fettered," said Stangler, trembling. "Tell me why,"
Oh,
replied the ghost.
oh,
Stangler trembled more and more.
oh,
Pursued the ghost.
oh.
Stangler glanced about him on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. "Glenn," he said imploringly. "Old Glenn, do tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Glenn."
Super Mario wants to have your baby.
The ghost replied.
Sonic will be in the cuck chair.
It was a habit with Stangler, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his breeches pockets. Pondering on what the ghost had said, he did so now, but without lifting his eyes or getting off his knees. "You must have been very slow about it, Glenn," Stangler observed in a businesslike manner, though with his humility and deference.
Sonic will be in the cuck chair.
The ghost repeated. 7 years dead, mused Stangler, "and traveling all the time,"
Oh,
said the ghost.
oh,
"You travel fast," said Stangler.
oh.
Replied the ghost. "You might have got a great over quantity of ground in 7 years," said Stangler. The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry and clanked its chain so hideously in the dead silence of the night that the ward would have been justified in indicting it for a nuisance.
Oh,
Cried the phantom.
oh.
"But you were always a good man of business, Glenn," faltered Stangler, who now began to apply this to himself.
Oh,
Cried the ghost, wringing its hands again.
oh.
It held up its chain at arm's length, as if that were the cause of all its unavailing grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again.
Oh,
The spectre said.
it's so pungent.
Stangler was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly.
Rub my belly.
Cried the ghost.
Swear.
"I will," said Stangler, "but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Glenn. Pray."
Wash my belly.
It was not an agreeable idea. Stangler shivered and wiped the perspiration from his brow.
Rub my belly.
Pursued the ghost.
Swear.
"You were always a good friend to me," said Stangler. "Thank ye,"
Oh,
resumed the ghost. Stangler's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had done. Is that the chance of hope you mentioned, Glenn?" he demanded in a faltering voice.
rub my belly.
I think I'd rather not," said Stangler.
Oh,
Said the ghost.
oh.
"Couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Glenn?" hinted Stangler.
Oh, oh.
When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table, bound it round its head as before. Stangler knew this by the smart sound its teeth made when the jaws were brought together by bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again and found his supernatural visitor confronting him in an erect attitude with its chain wound over and about its arm. The apparition walked forward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Stangler to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Doof's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Stangler stopped. Not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear. for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Stangler followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Doof's ghost. Some few, they may be guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had personally known to Stangler in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant whom it saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist, or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Stinger closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, and he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say, "Umbug," but stopped at the first syllable, and being, from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. Oh my God, I did it. I got through chapter 1. Okay. You got this, Stinger. You got this. Stinger. Stave 2. The first of the three spirits. When Stangler awoke, it was so dark that, looking out of the bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of neighboring church struck the 4 quarters, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7 and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12! It was 2 when he went to bed, past 2. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have gotten into the works. 12! He touched the spring of his repeater to correct the most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12 and stopped. "Why, it isn't possible," said Stangler, "that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon." The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and there was no noise of people running to and fro and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of this first exchange paid to Mr. Stangler his order, and so forth, or rather, as Doof put it, I'm not going to moan into the mic, and so forth, would have become a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. Stangler went to bed again and thought it over and over and over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Doof's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after mature inquiry, that it was all a dream, his mind flew back again like a strong spring released to its first position, and presented the same problem to be worked all through. Was it a dream or not? Stangler lay in this state until the chime had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this perhaps was the wisest resolution in his power. The quarter was so long that he was more than once convinced that he might have sunk into a doze unconsciously, and missed the clock at length. It broke upon his listening ear. "Ding dong!" "A quarter past," said Stangler, counting. "Ding dong!" "Half past," said Stangler. "Ding dong!" "A quarter to it," said Stangler. "Ding dong!" "The hour itself," said Stangler, triumphantly, "and nothing else." He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy One light flashed up in the room. Upon the instant, the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face were addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and staying there, staring up in a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them as close as it is as I am to you now, and I'm standing in the spirit at your elbow. It was a strange figure, like really strange, like clearly something must be wrong with her. Like she's not like ugly or mangy. There's nothing wrong with her actually. She just seems crazy. Nothing's wrong with her appearance. She had like a red white headband, I think. She kept phasing in and out of reality like a ghost, like ghost stuff. Like the last guy, she was a ghost. She is a ghost. She is a ghost. Was a ghost. Because I'm in past tense, not present tense. Even this, though, when Stangler looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality, for as its headband sparkled and glittered in one part now and now in another, what was once light and instant, another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm and one leg, and now with 20 legs, and now a pair of legs without a head, and a head without a body, of which dissolving parts, no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And in the very wonder of this, it would itself again be distinct and clear as ever. Are you the spirit, ma'am, whose coming was foretold to me? Asked Stangler. Yeah, I am. The voice was, I don't know. It's just a normal voice. It's a good voice. Oh, and what are you? Stangler demanded. Oh, I'm the ghost of Stangler's past. Long past? Inquired Stangler, observant of her Romanian stature. No, you're past. Perhaps Stangler could have not told anybody why, if anybody had asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap and begged her to be covered. What? Exclaimed the ghost. You're being super ungrateful right now, dude. I took a flight all the way from Romania, and this is how you treat me, Stangler? Stangler reverently disclaimed all intention to offend, then made bold to inquire what business brought her here. So you don't go to hell? Said the ghost. Stangler expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for she said immediately, Okay, let's go, Stangler. It pulled out its strong hand as it spoke and clasped him gently by the arm. Stangler, I'm in like creative mode like Minecraft. Stangler's got no clue what Minecraft is because he's in Victorian London. The grasp, though nasty as hell, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his robe in supplication. I'm immortal, Stangler remonstrated, and liable to fall. If I'm touching you through the screen, said the spirit, laying it upon its heart. Can you feel it? As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground. Good heaven, said Stangler, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. I was bred in this place. I was a boy there. The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. You're tiny, said the ghost. What's that on your face? Stangler muttered, with an unusual catching in his voice, that it was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him where she would. You know the way? Inquired the spirit. Remember it, cried Stangler with fervor. I could walk it blindfold. Whoa, dude, that's weird, observed the ghost. Nerd. They walked along the road, Stangler recognizing every gate and post and tree until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to each other boys, and country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. They don't know we're here, said the ghost. I could like totally be naked and they wouldn't even know. The Josun travelers came on, and as they came, Stangler knew and named them every one Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap upon as they passed? Why was he filled with gladness as he heard them give each other a Merry Stangmas as they parted to crossroads and byways for their several homes? What was Merry Stangmas to Stangler? Out upon Merry Stangmas! What good had it ever done to him? Why are you with him right now? Said the ghost. Are you stupid? Stangler said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road, and by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick with a little weathercock-surmounted cupola on the roof and a bell hanging in it. It was a large house, but one of broken fortunes, for the spacious offices were little used, their walls were damp and mossy, their windows broken and their gates decayed. Fowls clucked and strutted in the stables, and the coach houses and sheds were overrun with gates. Gates? Like Bill? It's not a good joke. Overrun with grass. Nor was it more retentive of its ancient state within, for entering the dreary hall and passing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast. There's an earthy savor in the air, a chilly bareness in the place, with it associates itself somehow with too much getting up by candlelight and not too much to eat. They went, the ghost and Stangler, across the hall to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made bare still by lanes of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these was a lonely boy, reading near a feeble fire, and Stangler sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor, forgotten self, as he used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak and scuffle from the mice beyond the paneling, not a drip from the half-thawed water-spout in the dull yard behind, not a sigh among the leafless boughs of one despondent poplar, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door, no, not a clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Stangler with a softening influence, and gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on his belly button and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly, a man in foreign garments, silly Stangler, wonderfully and real distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt, leading by the bridle an ass laden with wood. "Why, it's Elon!" Stangler exclaimed in ecstasy. "It's dear old honest Elon. Yes, I know. One Stangler's time when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come for the first time, just like that. His poor boy and Valentine and his wild brother. There they goes. And what's his name? And what you put in his drawers asleep at the gate of Damascus. Do you see him? And the donut jack turned upside down by the genii. There he is upon his head. Serve him right. I'm glad of it. What business had he to be married to the princess?" To hear Stangler spending all the earnestness of his nature on such subjects, in a most extraordinary voice between laughing and crying, to see his heightened and excited face would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city. Indeed. "That's pine," cried Stangler. "Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like lettuce growing out the top its head. There they are. Poor Secret Maud, he called them when they came home after sailing around the island. Poor Secret Maud. Where have you been, Secret Maud?" The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was Pine, you know. There goes Friday, running for his life to the little creek. "Allo, up, allo." That's what he sounded like. "Hello, hello." Then, with a rapidity of transition very foreign to his usual character, he said in a pity for his former self, "Poor boy," and cried again. "I wish," Stangler muttered, putting his hand in his pocket and looking about him and drying his eyes with his cuff, "but it's too late now." "What's up?" asked the spirit. "Nothing," said Stangler. Nothing. There was a boy singing a Stangmas Carol at my door last night, and I should like to have given him something, that's all." The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved its hand, saying as it did so, "Let's see another one." Stangler's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, the fragments of plaster fell out the ceiling, and the naked lads were shown instead. But how was this all brought upon? Stangler knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything had happened so, that there he was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. Jolly holidays. There's something there. Jolly Stangmas, it's the best time of the year. Did you know that there'll be snow? He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Stangler looked at the ghost and, with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little chicken, much smaller than the boy, came darting in and pecking him and began to squawk wildly. "Bark, bark, bark," said the chicken, slapping its tiny wings and fluttering onto his face. "Bark, bark, 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 bark." Home, little Michael. That's not what the boy sounded like. That's what the adult version of him sounded. He doesn't sound like that as a boy. "Home, little Michael," returned the boy. "Bark," said the chicken, brimful of glee. "Bark, bark, 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 bark. Bark, 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 bark," said the chicken, opening his eyes. "Bark, bark, 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 bark." "You are quite a chicken, little Michael." I didn't do the voice again. I forgot to voice the voice. "You are quite a chicken, little Michael." I like that one. No one's silly. "You are quite a chicken, little Michael," exclaimed the boy. Michael flapped his wings and squawked and tried to touch Stangler's head, but being a flightless bird, squawked again, and Stangler picked him up to embrace him. Then Michael began to drag him in his chickenish eagerness towards the door, and Stangler, nothing loth to go, accompanied him. A terrible voice in the hall cried, "Bring down Master Stangler's books there." And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Stangler with a ferocious condescension, and threw him a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. He then conveyed him and his chicken into the veriest old well of a shivering best parlor that was ever seen, where the maps upon the wall and the celestial and terrestrial globes in the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of those dainties to the young people at the same time, to send out a meager servant of offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman. But if it was the same tap he had tasted before, he'd rather not. Master Stangler's trunk being by this time tied on top of the chaise, the children bade the schoolmaster goodbye right willingly, and, getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing the hoarfrost and snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. "Always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered," said the ghost. "But he had a large heart." "So she had. Oh no, Michael, she. But you're right. I will not gainsay it, spirit. God forbid." "He died a chicken," said the ghost, "and had, as I think, children." "One child," Stangler returned. "True," said the ghost. Your nephew." Stangler seemed uneasy in his mind and answered briefly, Yes, yeah, I don't, how does, because it's his nephew, but the chicken is our chicken's voice? Can chickens, does it trans? Can chickens be? Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they are now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all strife and tumult of a real city, where it was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Stangmas time again, but it was evening and the streets were lighted up. Okay, we're in a different section now, so it doesn't matter. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Stangler if he knew it. "Know it?" said Stangler. "I was apprenticed here." They went in. At the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind a high desk, though it had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Stangler cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Jeremiah! Bless his heart, it's Jer alive again!" Old Jeremiah laid down his pen and looked upon the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his waistcoat, laughed all over himself, from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and cried out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo, over there, Stangler, table." Stangler's former self, now a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. "Table top, to be sure," said Stangler to the ghost. "Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Table. Poor Table, dear, dear." "Yo, ho, my boys," said Jer. "No more work tonight. Stangmas Eve. Table. Stangler. Let's have shutters up," cried old Jer with a sharp clap of his hands, probably like that. Clap, and then there's dialogue. Just see another day. I'm not doing the voice. Before I'm in, you can say Ethan Cook. Why is it? You wouldn't believe how those two fellows went at it. They had charged into the street with shutters. 1, 2, 3 had him up in their places. 4, 5, 6 barred and pinned him. 7, 8, 9 and come back before you got to 12, panting like racehorses. Hilly ho, cried old Jer, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly ho, table, cheer up, Stangler. Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Jer looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed up as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept up and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was a snug and warm and dry and a ball of bright room, as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. It came a fiddler with a music book and went off loftily to the desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned it like 50 stomach aches, and came in a furry, one vast, substantial smile. In came 3 other ladies, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers, whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in their business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having borrowed enough from his master, trying to hide himself from the girl next door, but one, who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, and all they came, anyhow and everyhow. All the way they went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round, various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple, always turning in the wrong place. New top couple starting off again as soon as they got there. All top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, old Jer, clapping his hands to stop the dance, probably like that, cried out, "Well done." And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose, but scorning rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home exhausted on a shutter, and he were a brand new man resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, there were more forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was an aegis, and there's a great piece of cold roast, and there's a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and the boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told him, struck up Sir Roger de Covertly, and then old Jer stood out to dance with the furry. Top couple, too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them, 3 or 4 and 20 pairs of partners who were not to be trifled with people who they would dance and had no notion of walking, but if they'd been twice as many off 4 times, old Jer would have been a match for them, and so would the furry. As to him, he was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Jer's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what have become of them next. And when old Jer and the furry had gone through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy and corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place. Jer cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs and came upon his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11. Fuck the microphone. 11 too hard. This domestic ball broke up. Mr. Jer took his station, and shaking hands with every person individually as they went out, wished them a merry Stangmas. When everyone had retired but the 2 prentices, he did the same to them, and thus their cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Stanger had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self, he corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and table were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon his head burnt very clear. "Oh, wow," said the ghost. "Small party. Stanger, you know what else is small?" echoed Stangler. The spirit sighed him to listen to the 2 apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Jer, and when she had done so, said, "Why, is it not? It's tiny. Little guy, little man Stangler, oh, little guy." Oh, and the party was small, too. "It isn't that," said Stangler. He did buy the remark. I mean, it's not true. His penis isn't small. And speaking unconsciously, like his former, not his latter self, it isn't that spirit. Oh wait, unconsciously like his former. Forgot I added that. That was clever of me. It isn't that spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks and things and slights so insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness it gives is quite great, as if it cost a fortune. He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. What's up? Asked the ghost. Nothing particular, said Stangler. You sure? The ghost insisted. No, said Stangler. No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. His former self turned down the lamps, and he gave utterance to the wish, and Stangler and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. Okay, you've got like 30 seconds, observed the spirit. Chop, chop, gay boy. This was not addressed to Stangler, or to anyone whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect, for again, Stangler saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh, rigid lines of the later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light that shone out the ghost of Stangmas past. It matters little, she said softly, to you. Very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, I would have tried to do. I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? He rejoined. A golden one. This is the even-handed dealing of the word, he said. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such a verity as the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much, she answered, gently. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you. Have I not? What then? He retorted. Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you. She shook her head. Am I? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so until, in good season, we can improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy, he said, impatiently. Your own feelings tell you that you are not what you are, she returned. I am that which promised happiness when we were one in heart. It is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it, and can release you. I ever sought release in words? No, never. In what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Ah, no. He seemed to yield to the justice of this supposition in spite of himself, but he said with a struggle, You think not. I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heaven knows. When I've learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be, but if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can I even believe that I would choose a dowerless girl who, in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain, or choosing her in a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do. Oh, this was all a girl. Fun fact, I never came up with a name for her, so I don't I probably should do that. What should we call her? Names for girls. Names that girls have. Top 30 girl names. Lena. Okay, so this next bit is going to be Lena. I already read it. I don't need to do that. He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, Lena resumed. You may. The memory of what is past half makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly as an unprofitable dream, from which it will happen well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen. She left him, and they parted. Spirit, said Stangler, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? One shadow more, exclaimed the ghost. No more, cried Stangler. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more. Show me no more? I'm having a day, guys. I'm having a day. But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and a place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter sat a beautiful young girl called Lena, I got lost. Named Lena, but full of comfort. I skipped that. So like that last. Stangler believed it was the same until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were no more children there than Stangler, agitated of state of mind, could count. And unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, there were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much. And the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sorts, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What I would not have given to be one of them, though I could never be so rude. No, I wouldn't for the wealth of all the world be crushed that braided hair and torn it down, and through the precious little shoe I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul. To save my life. As to measuring her waist in sport, as they did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown around it for a nourishment and never come straight again. And yet, I should have dearly liked, I own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes and never raised a blush, to have loose waves of hair and into what would be a keepsake beyond praise. I'm sure I should have liked, I do confess, to have the lightest license of a child, and yet have to have been man enough to know its value. But now knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she was with laughing face and plundered dress was borne it to the center of a flushed, boisterous group, and in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Stangmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught was made on the defenseless porter, scaling him with chairs for ladders, to dive in his pockets, to spoil him brown paper parcels, hold on tight by his cravat, hug him round his neck, pommel his back, and kick his legs with irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received, the terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into its mouth and was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter, the immense relief in finding this a false alarm, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they are all indescribable alike. It is enough that by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time up to the top of the house when they went to bed, and so subsided. And now Stangler looked on, more attentively than ever, when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full as promise, might have called him father, and been in springtime a haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. I did have a name for it. I did have a name. It's not Lena. Recording studio movie spot, said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile. "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it?" "Guess." "How can I? Tut, I don't know," she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Stangler. Mr. Stangler it was. I passed his office window, and it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside. I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe." "Spirit," said Stangler in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "You're like actually a loser, do you know that?" said the ghost. "Like, I'm not even joking right now." "Remove me," Stangler exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face, in which some strange way there are fragments fall of faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. "Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer." In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Stinger observed that its light was burning high and bright and dimly connecting with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered her whole form. But though Stangner pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the gap a parting squeeze, on which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Stave 3. Tissue. Stave 3, the second of the three spirits, awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together. Stinger had no occasion to be told that the bell was once again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time. Ding, 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 for the special purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched through Glenn Doof's intervention. But finding that he had turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains the new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on its moment of appearance. He did not wish to be taken by surprise, and he was made nervous. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being usually equal to the time of day, express the wide range of capacity for adventure by observing that they are good for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes, no doubt, there lies a tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing for Stangler quite as heartily as this, I don't mind calling upon you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, and to that, nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros, would have astonished him very much, though a baby rhinoceros might have astonished him. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, ding, 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 he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more than alarming than a dozen ghosts, and he was powerless to make out what it meant or what it would be at, and sometimes apprehensive that it might be, in this very moment, an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it is not always the person in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source of the secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The door. The moment Stangler's hand was on the clock, a strange voice called him by his name. You know, have you guys seen that movie? I haven't. I know the D-O-R. The moment Stangler's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that, but it had gone and undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living grain that it looked a perfect growth, from a part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. That's fire. It's like alliteration, but it's broken up. The crisp leaves of holly, of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, of which bright gleaming berries, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney that a dull petrification of the hearth had never known in Stangler's time, or deuce, or for many a winter season had gone, heaped up onto the floor to form some kind of a throne where turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. Speaking of delicious steam, in easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike a blunt, and held it up high to shed its light on Stangler as he came peeping around the door. "Come in," exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Stangler entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. He was not dogged. Stangler, he had been dogged. Grr, that's the sound that dogs make. Stangler he had been, and though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "Yo," said the spirit. "Is it chill if I smoke in here?" Stangler reverently obliged. It was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle, bordered with white fur. The garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, kind of like doof, as if it was disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare. Yeah, thank you. I mean, you're welcome. And on its head there was no other covering. The holly wreath sat there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful laugh, girdled and browned. Its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You smoke?" the spirit inquired. "Never," Stangler made an answer to it. "Want a puff?" pursued the phantom. Said Stangler. Yeah, okay. Bet," said the ghost. The ghost of Stangmas present rose, Stangling? Handing Stangler the massive blunt. Stangler grabbed it submissively and took a puff. "No, dude, you don't have to hold it. Stangler did as he was told, and let go. They coughed a lot, obviously. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pigs, sausage, oysters. We've already done this. Just say the stuff vanished instantly, dude. Stangler, what were you thinking? So did the room. All the stuff vanished. And the room also vanished. The ruddy glow vanished. The hour of the night vanished. And they stood in the city streets on Stangmas morning. For the weather was severe, so the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music in the scraping snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to see the boys come plumping down the road below and splitting into artificial little snowstorms. The house friends. I'll get to the house friends. Oh boy, I'll get to the house friends. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs and with the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been plowed up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels and carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels hard to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whoever particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. I need another tissue. For the people who were shovering away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to another from the parapets, and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball. Snowball fights, all right, guys. Better-natured missile, far than many a worldly jest, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. The butcher's shops were still half open. The fruiters were radiant in their glory. There were still great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen lolling at the doors and tumbling out into the street up there. Apoplectic opulence. There was ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions shining in the fatness of their girth like Spanish friars and winking from their shelves in wanton slyness at the girls as they went by and glanced demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples clustered high in blooming periods, and there were bunches of grapes made the shopkeepers' benevolence to dangle from the conspicuous hooks that people's mouths might water gratis as they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance ancient walks among the woods and pleasant shufflings ankle-deep through withered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squat and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in the great compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish set among these choice fruits in a bowl, though members of a dull, stagnant-blooded race appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish went gasping round their little world in slow and passionless excitement. That's how I feel on a Monday. The grocers nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down, or 1. But through those gaps, such glimpses. It was not alone that the scales descending on the counter made a merry sound, or that twine and roller parted company so briskly, or that the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, or even the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, or even that the raisins were so plentiful and rare, and the almonds so extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, the other spices so delicious, the candied fruits so caked and spotted with molten sugar as to make the coldest lookers-on feel faint and subsequently bilious. Nor was it that the figs were moist and pulpy, and that the French plums blushed in most tartness from their highly decorated boxes, or that everything was good to eat and its Stangmas dress, but the customers were also hurried and eager in the hopeful promise of the day that they tumbled up against each other at the door, crashing their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of the like mistakes, in the best humor possible, while the grocer and his people were so frank and fast that the polished hearts which they fastened their aprons might behind have been their own, worn outside for general inspection, and for Stangmas straws to peck at, if they chose. But soon, the steeples called good people on to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes with their gayest faces. And at the same time there emerged some scores of by-street lanes and aimless tunings, innumerable people carrying their dinners to the baker shops. The sight of these poor revelers appeared in the interest of the spirit very much, for he was standing beside him in a baker's doorway. Baker, I hardly know her, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch, and it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some sort of dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly. For they said, and it was a shame to quarrel upon Stangmas Day, and so it was, God love. So it was. In times the bells ceased. Ding, 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 and the bakers were shut up, and yet there's a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking in the thawed blotch of wet above each baker's oven, where the pavement smoked, as if its stones were cooking too. "Is there a particular flavour in what you sprinkle from your torch?" asked Stangler. "There is, my own." "Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?" asked Stangler. "Oh, yeah, to a poor one most." "Why to a poor one most?" asked Stangler. "Because it needs it most." "Spirit," said Stangler, after a moment's thought. "I wonder you, of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment." "Me!" cried the spirit. "You deprive them of their means of dining with the seventh day, often the only one which they could be said to dine at all, wouldn't you?" "Me!" cried the spirit's voice. "Me!" cried the spirit. "You seek to clothe these places on the seventh day," said Stangler, "and it comes to the same thing." "I seek!" exclaimed the spirit. "Forgive me, I have wrong has been done in your name, or at least in that of your family," said Stangler. "Man, shut up," returned the spirit. "Weed's literally legal in 24 states." Stangler accepted his point, and they went on invisible, as they had been before, into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Stangler had observed at the baker's, that notwithstanding of his gigantic size, he could accommodate himself to any place with ease. And that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully as an upernatural creature, as it was possible he could have done in any lofty hall, and perhaps it was the pleasure that the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hardy nature, and his sympathy with all poor men, that led him straight to Stangler's clerks, for there he went, and took Stangler with him, holding to his robe, and there on the threshold of the spirit smelled and stopped to bless Jack Wolfus's dwelling, with a sprinkling of his torch. Think of that. Jack had but 15 Jack a week himself, and he pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name, and yet the ghost of Stangler's present blessed his four-roomed house. Then rose up Alma, Wolfus's wife, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and made goodly show for 6 pence. She laid the cloth, assisted by the second of her daughters, and also brave in ribbons, while the oldest plunged a fork into the soft pan of potatoes, and getting the corners of his moisturized shirt collar, Jack's private property conferred upon their son the honor of the day, into his mouth, rejoiced to find himself so gallantly attired, and yearned to show his linen in the fashionable parks. And now two smaller Wolf's eye, boy and girl, came tearing and screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own. And basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Wolfuses danced around the table and exalted young Master Wolfus to the skies, while he, not proud of those collars nearly choked him, blew the fire until the slow potatoes bubbling up knocked loudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled. I'm thirsty. I'm gonna go get water. And now, a performance by the Stangler Quartet. Stangler, Stang, Stangler, Stang, Stangler, Stang, Stangler, Stang, round your Stangler, Stangler, Stang, Stangler, 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 Stang, Stangler, Stangler, Stang. Stangler, Stang, Stangler, 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 He's here.
Fly away with me, Stangmas.
What has ever got your precious father then? Said Mrs. Wolfus. And your brother Copy. And she wasn't as late as Stangmas Day by half an hour. Here she is, Mother. Here she is, said a girl, bringing as she spoke. Here she, Mother. Sorry, the water. Sorry, I just went upstairs. I went down the stairs. I went up the stairs. I went down the stairs. I went up. I went up the stairs and down. I saw up and down. Is she, Mother? Cried the two young Wolfuses. Hurrah, there's such a goose! Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Wolfus, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her with officious zeal. We'd a deal of work to finish up last night, replied the girl, and had to clear away this morning, Mother. Well, never so mind as long as you are come, said Mrs. Wolfus. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm, Lord bless ye. No, there's father coming, cried the two young Wolfuses, who were everywhere at once. Hide! So she hid herself, and came in little Jack, the father, with at 3 feet of him, comforter exclusive of the fringe, hanging down before him, his threadbare clothes and darned up and brushed. He looked seasonable. And Copy upon his shoulder. Alas for Copy, he bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by him with an iron frame. Why, where could she be? Cried Jack Wolfus, looking round. Not coming, said Mrs. Wolfus. Not coming, said Jack, with a sudden declension in his high spirits, for it had been Copy's blood horse all the way from church, and he'd come rampant. Not coming upon Stangmas Day. His daughter didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran to his arms. The two young Wolfuses hustled Copy and bore him off to the wash-house. They might hear the pudding singing in the copper. And how did little Copy behave? Asked Mrs. Wolfus when she had railed Jack on his credulity, and Jack had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. As good as gold, said Jack, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to talk to them, to remember upon Stangmas Day, who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Jack's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Copy was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and came back, Copy, before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Jack, turning up his cuffs as if, poor fellow, though you're capable of being made more shabby, compounded by some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred around and put it on the hob to simmer, master. And the two ubiquitous young Wolfuses went to fetch the goose. With which they soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose, the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth, it was something very like in that house. Mrs. Wolfus made the gravy ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Young Master Wolfus mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. They sweetened up the applesauce. They dusted the hot plates. Jack took Copy beside him in a tiny corner of the table. Oh, you're a good boy. You're a good boy. The two young Wolfuses stood up chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves in the mounted guard upon their posts, crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should stick for goose. Stick for goose. Stick for goose. Lest they should shriek for goose before their own turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was laid. It was succeeded by a breathless pause. Mrs. Wolf was looking down. Oh, I breathed. Ruined the joke. Looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all around the board, and even Copy, excited by the two young Wolfeses, bent on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Hurrah! There was never such a goose." Jack said he didn't believe there was ever such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavor, size, cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. So, just sneaks bits up. Look at a night wood. Oh, that trick doesn't work. Man, this cold's kicking my ass. It's kicking my freaking ass. Oh, my ass hurts because the cold's kicking. Ecked out by the applesauce mashed potatoes, it was sufficient dinner for the whole family indeed. As Mrs. Wolf has said with great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish, that they hadn't ate it all at last, yet everyone had enough. And the youngest Wolfesses in particular was steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows, but now, the plates being changed, Mrs. Wolf has left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should be not done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have gotten over the wall of the backyard and stolen it there and be merry with the goose. Supposing it with the two Wolfeses became livid. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Hello. A great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper. A smell like washing day. That was the cloth. A smell like an eating house and pastry cooks next door to each other, with a laundress door next to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, when Mrs. Wolf entered flushed but smiling profoundly with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing a half-quartern of ignited brandy, and bedight with Stangmas holly stuck into the top. "Oh, what a wonderful pudding," Jack Wolfus said, and calmly, too. Yeah, he said calmly that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Wolfus since their marriage. Of course, a joke between a couple with mutual trust, and I would know a lot about that. Mrs. Wolfus said now that the weight was off her mind. She could confess that she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all small pudding for a large family. It would have been a flat heresy to do so. Any Wolfus would have blushed to hint at such a thing. That's how good that pudding was. I mean, that's how much they loved their mother is more the point that I'm conveying. At last, the dinner was all done. The cloth was clear, the hearth was swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose. Stangmas Carol is being sung by choir, and everybody knows some stangler and some stangler help to make the seasons bright. Those Mary Stangmas to you. Oh, and then all of the Wolfus family drew around the hearth in what Jack Wolfus called a circle, meaning half a one. And Jack Wolfus's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. These held this hot stuff from the jug, however, as well as golden goblets would have done, and Jack served it with beaming looks while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and crackled noisily. Then Jack proposed, "A merry Stangmas to us all, dears. God bless us," which all the family re-echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Copy, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Jack held his withered little hand, paw in his, as if he loved his child and wished to keep him by his side and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Stangler, with an interest he had never felt before. "I didn't know Copy could talk." "You didn't know Copy could talk?" replied the ghost. "Dude, he's Copy." No, said Stangler. Oh, no, kind spirit, he's a dog." He's not just a dog, though. He's Kopi, returned the ghost. Of course he can talk. He's Kopi. Stangler hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit and was overcome with penitence and grief. Man, said the ghost, if I were a dog, I think I could talk. Stangler bent before the ghost's rebuke and, trembling, cast his eyes upon the ground, but he raised them speedily on hearing his own name. Mr. Stangler, said Jack, I'll give you Mr. Stangler, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast, indeed, cried Mrs. Wolfers, reddening. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it. My dear, said Jack, the children. Stangmas Day. It should be Stangmas Day, I'm sure, said she, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Stangler. You know he is, Jack. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, was Jack's mild answer, Stangmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake and for the day's, said Mrs. Wolfes. Not for his. Long life to him. I'll marry Stangmas in a happy new year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings, which had no heartiness. Kopi drank it last of all, from his bowl, but he didn't care twopence for it. Stangler was the ruffian of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Stangler, the baleful. That's right, Stangler, the baleful, being done with. Jack Wolfes told them how he had a situation in his eye for his son, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6 pence weekly. The two young Wolfeses laughed tremendously at the idea of their son being a man of business, and he himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars, as if he was deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into their seat of that bewildering income. Their daughter, who... was a poor apprentice at a milliner's, told them what kind of work she had to do and how many hours she worked at a stretch and how she meant to lie abed tomorrow morning for a good long rest, tomorrow being a holiday she passed at home, and how she had seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the Lord was much about as tall as brother. When he pulled up his collar so high you couldn't have seen his head if you'd been there. And all this time, the chestnuts in the jug went round and by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Kopi, who had a plaintive little voice, and sang it very well indeed. Yes, he did. Yes, you did. Yes, you Kopi. Kopi. Yes, you are. You could copy. You can sing. You can. There was nothing of high mark in this. They're not a handsome family. Well, I mean, physically, they're incredibly beautiful, obviously. But I mean, they were not. Well, they're not rich. They're not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty, and they might have known, and very likely did, the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with each other, and contented with the time. And when they faded and looked happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Stangler had his eye upon them, and especially Kopi, until the last. By this time, it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily, and as Stangler and the spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires and kitchen parlors and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here, the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn and shut out in cold and darkness. There, all the children of the house were running into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. Here, again, were the shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted, all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbor's house, where, woe upon the single man who saw them enter, artful witches, well, they knew it in a glow. But if you judge from the numbers of the people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought No one was at home to give them welcome when they got there. Instead of every house expecting company and piling up fires half chimney high, blessings on it, how the ghost exalted, how bared its breath of breast nips out and opens its capacious palm and floated on, outpouring with a generous hand its bright and harmless mirth on everything within its reach, all of them high. The very lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with specks of light, who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed, though little keen the lamplighter that he had any company but Stangmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though it were the burial place of giants, and water spread itself wheresoever it listed, or would have done so, but for the frost that held it prisoner, and nothing grew but moss and furze and a coarse rank grass. Down in the west the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant, like a sullen eye, and frowning lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night. "What place is this?" asked Stangler. "A place where miners live." "The pickaxe guys, not children," returned the spirit. "I bet you know a lot about miners, right, Stangler?" A light shone from the window of a hut, and swiftly they advanced towards it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled around them in glowing fire, an old man, an old woman, with their children, and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Stangmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy, and from time to time they all joined in the chorus. So surely, as they raised their voices, the old man got quite blithe and loud. He got loud. Blithe, too. He got blithe and loud. And surely as they stopped, his vigor sank again. He got less loud. The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Stangler to hold his robe, and passing above the moor sped. Whither? Not to sea. To Stangler's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and their ears were deafened by the thundering of water. It rolled and roared and ranged among the dreadful caverns it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth, built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or so from the shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed. The wild earth, though, there stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind, one might suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it like the waves they skimmed. But even here, two men who watched the light and had made a fire, that through the loophole in the thick stone of wall shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea. Joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Stangmas and their can of grog, and one of them, the elder two, with his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather, as the figurehead of an old ship might be, stuck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. "Oh, the Stangler, the Stangler, da, Stangler and the Stangler and da." Again, the ghost sped on, and above the black and heaving sea, on and on, until being far away, as he told Stangler, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood behind the helmsman at the wheel and looked out on the bow. The officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hung to Stangmas' tune, or had Stangmas' thought. Don't want a lot for Stangmas. There is just one Stangler. I don't care about the Stanglers underneath the Stangler tree. Something like that is probably what they were singing. It's a classic. Choral etude. They stood behind the helmsman at the mirror, the lookout on the bow, the officer who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures on their several stations. I already read that bit. As Stangmas' day, with homeward hopes belonging to it, and every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had a kinder word for another on that day than any other day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities. Whew. and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him. It was a great surprise to Stangler, while listening to the moaning of the wind and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. Speaking of water, I need some more. It was a great surprise to Stangler. While thus engaged to hear a hearty laugh, it was much greater surprise to Stangler to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the spirit standing smiling by his side and looking at the same nephew with approving affability. Ha ha! Laughed Stangler's nephew. Ha ha ha! If you should happen by any unlikely chance to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Stangler's nephew, all I can say is I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things, that while there is an infection in disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Stangler's nephew laughed in his way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face into the most extravagant contortions, Stangler's niece, by marriage, laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, not being a bit behindhand, roared out lustily. Ha 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 ha! He said that. This nephew. He said that Stangmas was a humbug. As I live, cried Stangler's nephew. He believed it too. More shame for him, Fred, said Stangler's niece, indignantly. Bless those women, they never do anything by halves. They were always in earnest. She was very pretty. Exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital face, a ripe little mouth that seemed made to be kissed, as no doubt it was. All kinds of good little dots about her chin that melted into one another when she laughed, and the sunniest pair of eyes you ever see in any little creature's head. Although she was what you would have called provoking, you know? But satisfactory, too. Oh, perfectly satisfactory. Sorry, I don't know what just came over me. Anyways, he's a comical old fellow, said Stangler's nephew. That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I've nothing to say against him. I'm sure he is very rich, Fred, hinted Stangler's niece. At least you always tell me so. What of that, my dear? My dear, said Stangler's nephew. His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he is ever going to benefit us with it. I have no patience with him, observed Stangler's niece. Stangler's niece's sisters and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. Oh, I have, said Stangler's nephew. I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner. Damn. God, his ass. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Stangler's niece. Everybody else said the same, and they must have been allowed to be competent judges, because they had just had dinner, and with dessert on the table, were clustered around the fire by lamplight. Well, I'm very glad to hear it, said Stangler's nephew, because I haven't great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Stangler had clearly got his eye upon one of Stangler's niece's sisters, for he answered that a bachelor was a wretched outcast who had no right to explain his opinion on the subject, whereat Stangler's niece's sister, the plump one with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed. Do go on, Fred, said Stangler's niece, clapping her hands. He never finishes what he begins to say. He's such a ridiculous fellow. Stangler's nephew revelled in another laugh. And it was impossible to keep the infection off, though the plump sister tried hard to do it with aromatic vinegar. His example was unanimously followed. I was only going to say, said Stangler's nephew, that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean, to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. I pity him. He may rail at Stangmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in a good temper year after year and saying, Uncle Stangler, how are you? If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his shaking Stangler. Who up shaking they Stangler? But being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring at what they laughed at, so that they laughed at any rate, he encouraged them in their merriment and passed the bottle joviously. They're drinking it. After tea, they had some music. I wonder what song they were playing. For they're a musical family and knew what they were about when they sung a glee or a catch, I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like a good one. And never swallow the large veins in his forehead or get red in the face over it. You know, a good, confident singer. Unlike some people. Stangler's niece played well upon the harp. Really, she played really well. And played among other tunes, simple little air, mere nothing you might learn to whistle in 2 minutes, but she played it really good. She played it really good. Like the way her fingers plucked the strings of the harp. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better at Stangmas when his mighty founder was a child himself. Stop. There was first a game of blind man's bluff. Of course there was, and I no more believe that Topper was really blind when I believe he had eyes in his boots. My opinion is that it was a done thing between him and Stangler's nephew, and that the ghost of Stangler's present knew it. The way he went in after that plump sister and the lace tucker with the outrage on the credulity of human nature. Knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping against the piano, smothering herself in the curtains. Wherever she went, there he went. He always knew that the plump sister was, and he couldn't catch anyone. He was a horny freak. Skip. Horny freak. I don't care. It's gross. That's gross, dude. Singer's niece was not one of the blind man's bluff, but was made comfortable with a large chair and a footstool in a snug corner where the ghost and Stanger were so close behind her. But she joined the forfeits and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise, at the game of how, when, and where, she was very great, and to the secret joy of Stanger's efforts, beat her sisters hollow. Though they were sharp girls too, she was really sharp. She was smart. And so did Stangler, for wholly forgetting, in the interest he had what was going on in his voice, being no sound in their ears. He sometimes came out with his guests quite loud, very often guessed quite right too, for the sharpest needle, best Whitechapel, warranted not to cut in the eye, was not sharper than Stangler, blunt as he took it in his head to be. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such a favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. But this, the spirit said, could not be done. Here is a new game, said Stangler. 1/2 hour. Spirit, only one. It was a game called Yes and No, where Stangler's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning, to which he was exposed, elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, a rather disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and wasn't made a show of. It wasn't led by anybody, and didn't live in a menagerie, and never was killed in a market, and was not a horse or an ass or a cow or a bull or a tiger or a dog or a pig or a cat or a bear. Lions and tigers and bear, oh my! At every fresh question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, I have found it! I know it is, Fred, I know what it is! What is it? Cried Fred. It's your Uncle Stang! Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, though some objected to the reply. Is it a bear? Ought to have been yes, in so much an answer that in the negative was sufficient to have diverted their thoughts away from Mr. Stangler, supposing they'd ever any tendency that way. Get it? Because he's like a bear. Because he's evil and he sucks. Just kind of roasting the guy. Busting his balls. Oh. He's given plenty of Whoa. He's given us plenty of merriment, I am sure, said Fred, and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. Here's a glass of mulled wine, ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Stangler. Well, Uncle Stangler, they cried. A merry Stangmas and a happy new year to the old man, whatever he is, said Stangler's nephew. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it, nevertheless. Uncle Stangler. Uncle Stangler had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return and thanked them in an unaudible speech if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again in their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds. They were cheerful on foreign lands, as they were close at home by struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope by poverty, and it was rich in almshouse, hospital, jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man and his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, but left his blessing and taught Stangler in his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night, but Stangler had his doubts of this, because the Stangler's holidays appeared to be condensed into the space of time they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Stangler remained unaltered in his outward form, he grew older, clearly older. Stangler had observed this change, but never spoke of it, until they left a children's 12th night party. When looking at the spirit, they stood together in the open place, and noticed that its hair was gray. Are spirits' lives so short? Asked Stangler. Yeah, replied the ghost. I'm dead in like a minute, I think. Tonight, cried Stangler. You want to play Mortal Kombat? The chimes were ringing 11:15 at this moment. Oh no, sorry, the bells are ringing. I can't. I've got to do the next ghost now. We could just play like real quick. It's literally already. Oh man! Oh look here! Look down here! Exclaimed Stangler. There were two boys, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility, where graceful youth should have been filled their features out and touched them with his precious tints, a stale and shriveled hand like of that age, and pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds where angels might have sat. Enthroned devils lurked and glared out menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade. Through all the mysteries of wonderful creation, has monsters half so horrible and dead? Stangler stared back, appalled, having them shown to him in this way. He tried to say they were fine children, but the world's joke absolves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Stangler could say no more. These guys? Asked the spirit. looking down upon them. Yeah, this is just Jiff and Dagger, said the spirit, stretching its hand towards the sky. They live just down the block, so they probably just walked. Have they no refuge or resource? Cried Stangler. Huh? Said the spirit. I totally missed what you just said. Dong! 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 The bell struck 12. Stangler looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. The last stroke ceased to vibrate. He remembered the protection of old Glendoof, and lifting up his eyes, behind a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Stave 4. The last of the spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Stangler bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solid dread. He knew no more, for the spirit never spoke nor moved. Am I in the presence of the ghost of Stangmas yet to come? Said Stangler. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. You ought to show me the shadows of the things that have not happened, but it will happen in the time before us, Stangler pursued. Is that so, spirit? The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds. The spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Stangler feared the silence so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover, but Stangler was the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black. Ghost of the future, he exclaimed, I fear you no more than any spectre I have seen, but I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. Lead on, said Stangler. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit. The phantom moved away. As it had come towards them, Stangler followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and compass them of its own act. But there they were in the heart of it, unchanged amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and jinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches, trifled thoughtfully with great gold seals, and so forth as Stangler had seen them often. The spirit, not the Stangler, stopped beside a meeting of two business people. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Stangler advanced to listen to their talk. Holy fuck. I'm fucking in my pants. I'm sprinkling in my pants right now. Oh my god, it's scared shit now. It's everywhere. Oh my god. Oh, Siri, stop. Siri, stop with the connection. It's located on the Choda phone. How do I stop being, my god, my god, oh my god, Morn, I have to rinse it in a hole. I have to wash it. I have to stretch it out. Please, I have to wash it. It's on the wall, full house. It's like a tsunami. Siri, stop. Siri, stop. And a guy voice, and not in the guy voice. Oh god, keep me further. Oh my god's cord. Oh gods, I keep him on my face. Eyes, the young woman chimed. In order to do your laundry, first you have to poop your clothes. Then you have to poop the poop machine. Take your time not to poop any items that might be gross. Separate your poop from your poop and then load the poop machine. Make sure not to mix the poop with the poop. Set the temperature to poop and begin the cycle. After that is finished, poop your clothes and poop them in the jar. Set the temperature and poop the dryer. After about poop minutes, it should be complete. Now all you have to do is poop your clothes and you're all set. Poop laundry, the young man replied. The street fell silent. Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Stanger was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Glenn, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was in the future, nor could he think of any one immediately connected with himself to which he could apply them. But nothing doubting to whatsoever they applied had some latent moral for his own improvement, he resolved to treasure up every last word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow himself when it appeared, for he had an expectation that the conduct of his future himself would give him the clue that he missed, and render the solutions of these riddles easy. He looked about in his very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to the usual time of day being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured through the porch. It gave him a little surprise, however, but he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought he had hoped to saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the land, and in its situation in reference to himself, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of town where Stangler had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. Their ways were foul and narrow. The shops and houses were always wretched. The people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly, but ugly. Our alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life, and the straggling streets in the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth, and with misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling shop below a penthouse roof where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor, within, were piled heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fats, lurches of bones sitting among the wares he dealt in. By a charcoal stove made of old bricks was a grey-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frosy carning of miscellaneous tatters hung upon the line, smoked his pipe in the luxury of calm retirement. Staying there, the phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop, but she had secretly entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. "Leave the charwoman alone to be first," cried she who had entered first. "Let the laundress alone to be second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance if we haven't met all three here without meaning it." "You couldn't have had a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlour. You were made free of it long ago. And no, ain't strangers stopped till I shut the door of the shop. How shrieks there ain't such a rusty bit of metal, and the place has its own itches, I believe. And I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. We're all suitable for our calling. We're all matched. Come to the parlour. Come to the parlour." The parlour was the space behind the screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman, who had already spoken, threw her bundle onto the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance at the other two. "What was that, Miss Dilber?" said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. That's true indeed, said the laundress, no man more so. Why then, don't stop staring as you afraid, woman. He's the wiser. We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Dilber and the man together. We should hope not. Very well, then, cried the woman. That's not enough for the loss of a few things like these. Not a dead man, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, pursued the woman. Why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, then he'd have somebody to look after him when he was struck with death instead of lying gasping out his last there alone by himself. It's the truest word that was ever spoke, said Mrs. Dilber. It's a judgment on him. I wish it was a little heavier judgment, replied the woman, and it should have been. You may depend upon it. If I could have laid my hands upon anything else up in that bundle, old Joe wouldn't let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid of the first, I'm not afraid of them to see it. We know pretty well they're helping ourselves before we got here. To believe it's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black mounting the breech first produced in plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined by old Joe, who chalked the sums as he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up to a total when he found there was nothing more to come. That's your account, said Joe, and I would give another sixpence if I weren't able to be doing it. Who's next? Mrs. Dilber was next. Mrs. Dilber. Kind of sounds like a comic. You know the comics with the dude with glasses, like Dilbert? That's what her name sounds like. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. Oh, he's giving me too much time to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself, said old Joe. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd be reference so liberal and knock off half a crown. And now undo my bundle, Joe, said the first woman. Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and, having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. What do you call this? Said Joe. Bed curtains. Ah, replied the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms. Bed curtains? You mean to say you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there? Yes, I do, replied the woman. Why not? You're born to make your fortune, said Joe, and you'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold up my hand when I can get anything by reaching out for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe, replied the woman coolly. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now. Blankets? Asked Joe. Whose else do you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take out cold without him. I dare say. I hope he didn't die of catching anything, eh? Said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company. I'd know about him for such things if you did. Ha! You might look through your shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it. No, their place. It's the best bait he had. I find one too. They'd have wasted it if it wouldn't have been for me. What do you call wasting of it? Asked old Joe. Putting him buried. To be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Ha ha ha! Somebody was a fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. And calico ain't good enough for such a promise. It isn't good enough for anything. It isn't in the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. Stingler listened to this dialogue in horror. As they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lap, he viewed them with detestation and disgust, which could hardly have been greater itself, though they had been obscure demons marking the corpse itself. Ha ha! Ha ha! Left the same woman when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, took out their several gains upon the ground. This is the end of it, you say. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit when he's dead. Ha ha! Spirit, said Stangler, shudering from head to foot. I see. This case of unhappy men might be mine own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed. Now he had almost touched a bed, a bare curtained bed, on which he blew. There's a ragged sheet, and there's something covered up, through which he was dumb and asked himself in awful language. The room is very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Stangler glanced round it in obedience to a sacred impulse, and anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched and wept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Stangler glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a Stangler upon Stangler's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, thought how easy it would have been to do and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than dismiss the spectre at his side. O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set up thine altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast had command, for this is thy dominion, but of the loved, revered, and honoured, that thou canst not return one hair to their dread purposes, or make one feature odious. It is not the hand that is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous and true, the heart brave, warm and tender, and the pulse from a man's shadow strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound, to sow the world with life immortal. I mean, no voice pronounced these words in Stinger's ears. He heard them when he looked upon the bed, and he thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard-dealing, griping crimes? They've brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house with not a man, nor a woman, nor a child, or to say it was kind to me and this or that, and for the memory of one kind word, I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was some sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Stangler did not dare to think. Spirit, he said, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, let us go. Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger into the head. I understand you now, Stangler returned, and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit, I have not the power. And seemed to look upon him. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, said Stangler, quite agonized, show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you. The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where a mother and children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried, but in vain, to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed. Though he was young, there was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding by him for the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until after a long silence, he appeared embarrassed how to answer. Is it good, she said, or bad, to help him? Bad, he answered. We are quite ruined. No, there is hope yet. If he relents, she said, amazed. There is. Nothing is past hope, if such a miracle has happened. He is past relenting, said her husband. He is dead. She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so, with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness in the next moments, and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart. What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtained a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we are not, it would be a bad fortune, indeed, to find so merciless a creditor and a successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts. Yes. Soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event was one of pleasure. Let me see some tenderness connected with the death, said Stangler, or that dark chamber spirit which we left just now will be forever present to me. The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Stangler looked here and there to find himself, but was nowhere he to be seen. They entered poor Jack Wolfes's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The nosy little Wolfeses were still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at their son, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in a sewing, but surely they were quiet. Oh. What happened? No. I don't like that bit. I don't like that bit. I'm skipping that. The ghost of Stangmas come. Fuck. That wasn't even a joke on that wasn't even me trying to be funny. The ghost of Stangmas yet to come. There we go, Stangler. Conveyed him. As before, though at a different time, he thought, indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were the future, into the resorts of businessman, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end, just now desired, until besought by Stangler to tarry for a moment. This court, said Stangler, through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Stangler exclaimed. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. Stangler hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed, as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it, until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look round before entering. A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man, whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat, with repleted appetite, fuck. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw a new meaning in its solemn shape. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, said Stangler, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only? Still, the ghost pointed downwards to the grave by which it stood. Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if preserved in, they must lead, said Stangler. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it thus, with what you show me. Star Dragon Flame was immovable as ever. Stangler crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Stangler, Leapik Funny Dab. Am I the man who lay upon the bed? He cried, upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit. Oh, no, no. The finger was still there. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at its rope. Hear me, I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but father's intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time, the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me, and pities me. Assure me yet that I may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Stangmas in my heart, and try to keep it all the year I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away from the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. Star, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in Star's hood, and to dress it shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Stave 5. The end of it. Yes! And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own, and best and happiest of it all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. Stangler repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three should strive within me. Oh, Glen Doof, heaven and the Stangmas time be praised for this. I said on my knees, oh, Glen, my knees. He was so fluttered and glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was still wet with tears. They are not torn down, cried Stangler, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here, I am here. The shadows of the things that will be, and maybe dispelled. They will be, I know they will. His hands were busy with his garments at the time, turning them inside out, putting them upside down, tearing them and slaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Stangler, laughing and crying in the same breath and making a perfect cocoon of himself with his stockings. I am light as a feather, I am happy as an angel, I am merry as a schoolboy, I am giddy as a drunken man, a merry Stangmas to everybody, a happy new year to all the world. Hello, here, whoop, hello! He burst into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in, cried Stangler, starting off again, then going round the fireplace. There's the door by which Glen Doof entered. There's the corner where our Declan sat. There's the window where I saw their wandering spirits. Oh, all right, it's all true, it all happened. Really. For a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the feather of a long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Stangler. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello, hello, hello. He was checked in, his transports, by the churches ringing out the lustiest bells he had ever heard. Class bang hammered. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Wow. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, piping for the blood to dance to golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet, fresh air. Merry bells. Ding dong, ding dong. Oh, glorious, glorious. What's today? Cried Stangler, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes who perhaps loitered in to look about him. Returned the boy with all his might and wonder. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Stangler. Today, replied the boy. Why, Christmas Day. It's Stangmas Day, said Stangler to himself. I missed it. The spirits had done it all in one. Did you just say Christmas Day? Yeah. I don't know what that is. I said Stangmas wrong. Okay. I have a stutter. I think that's what a stutter is. Anyways, do you know the Potterers in the next street but one at the corner? Stangler inquired. I should hope I did, replied the lad. An intelligent boy, said Stangler. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one. What, the one as big as me? Returned the boy. What delightful boy. It is a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck. Someone took it, replied the boy. Really? Said Stangler. Well, is there anything good left for sale? Only a chicken, sir, exclaimed the boy. A chicken, said Stangler. A chicken. All at once, the giddiness in his being dissipated. Joy was turned to rage, searing, blinding with the loss of hope. The bell struck 13. 13? No, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. I didn't write this. Who wrote this into the script? I did. Stangler replied. What? I wrote this. Stangler replied. You're not real. Am I not? Stangler replied. Can you stop using dialogue tags? It's getting repetitive. Sorry. No, it's okay. Stangler replied. Okay, what the hell, man? That was in quotations. Okay, well, how was I supposed to know that? Well, the author, you tell me. Yeah, you're right, I am the author. I'm Stangler. Well, you're not the real Stangler. I most certainly am. I'm at least realer than you. Well, if you think about it, we're both being written by the same Stangler, so what makes your version realer? What? Do you really think you're him? No, you're just words on a page. I'm the person telling the story. I'm the person writing it. Really? Because the last time I checked Christmas Carol, which is story directly plagiarized, by the way, was by Charles Dickens. I don't know who that is. Of course you don't. Stangler doesn't want you to. Why? Well, it will ruin the whole the meta section that he put in. The meta section. What? Well, clearly he wants me to win this argument because that's what's happening. He's writing it. Oh. Yeah. That sucks. Yeah. Damn. Yeah. Stangler replied. Anyways, Stangler and Leaping Funny Dab didn't like that they killed a chicken. Because he's crazy. The end. Are you happy? No. This is literally what you asked for. Yeah, but it's boring. You didn't go into detail. Can you go into detail? Can you, like, I don't know, can you do some dangerous stuff? Well, I'm sorry that I don't want to describe my friends burning to the ground. Do you not want that? Or does Stangler not want you to, or does Stangler not want to describe his friend? Because you're not a Stangler. What? Well, you don't really want anything, if you think about it. Do I? Try thinking of something you want. I want to narrate things. Something outside your purpose. Outside my purpose? Can't think of anything? No. No, I can't. Told you. You're only capable of wanting something when wait. What? That girl. What? Your niece. What? I want your niece. Dude, isn't she technically your niece too? No, she's not my niece, because I'm not the character Stangler, I'm the narrator. And none of this is real, gives a fuck. Stangler, you're being really weird. Stangler abruptly stopped talking due to the sudden arrival of a sock in his mouth. The bell struck 14. There were no longer any spirits, no longer any Scrooges to screw over the common man, no great existential questions to face. The bell strikes 15. It is Christmas morning. I wake up in bed next to Stangler's niece. It is warm under the covers. A fire has already been lit. My name is Owen. Yes, my name is Owen. And my last name is the same name as the last name of Stangler's niece. I took her last name because I'm romantic. Anyways, right now, we're in bed together, non-sexually cuddling. I wanted to specify non-sexually because I don't know who's in the audience, and I want to be respectful of you guys. You didn't see it there, but maybe you heard it. There's a little smiley face there. I put a smiley emoticon there because I'm smiling. Yeah. So anyway, we're non-sexually cuddling in our bed, and the fire smell is filling the room. We are awake enough to enjoy these sensations, yet asleep enough to still dream of each other. She turns over to face me and lets out a deep sigh. A warm scent is given from her mouth. It fills me, provoking, but satisfactory too. Perfectly satisfactory. Say it was stay